All right, now another of our periodic profiles of candidates for Rhode Island governor. Compliments of the Providence Business News. Mark Murphy is the paper's editor. Several weeks back, the paper profiled Republican candidate Alan Fung, and this week one of the Democrats is being profiled, Matt Brown, challenging the incumbent governor, Gina Raimondo, in the primary in that party. And according to this profile anyway, he seems to go out of his way to show how opposite he is in terms of policy decisions to the incumbent.
Well, if you want to connect Rhode Island to the national political scene, you can see Matt Brown as sort of a Bernie Sanders progressive in terms of what his policy prescriptions are, and in his describing himself as being different than the governor, who I think he sees as being much more beholden to corporate interests than to the common folk.
A corporate-backed government, he says, that benefits business interests over regular Rhode Islanders in the Raimondo administration.
Well, he points to a number of the incentive programs that the governor has put in place, and which have delivered a number of companies coming here. The idea behind the incentives, of course, is that it makes Rhode Island a more attractive place, at least to look at to begin with. I think no one in government believes that incentives are the only thing, at least incentives Rhode Island can offer. Some states are offering, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. Rhode Island can't do that, but it can get it in the conversation, and then everything else about the state is then going to get the companies to decide whether they want to locate operations here.
All right, just for the purposes of the profile anyway, you asked him if he likes being identified as a progressive, and he said yes.
Well, he's not backing away from this at all. I think it's interesting. I mean, he talks about incentives. He talks about where the governor's money is coming from, saying a lot of it's out of state, a lot of it's sort of tied to corporations. There's been the recent dust-up over a firm that contributed, but then the contribution was given back. Does that mean that the governor has a problem with Wall Street? Of course, the interesting thing is Matt Brown has been out of state since for most of the time since he was the Secretary of State here. And if you look at his contributions, it's about the same percentage are out of state as the governor's. Now, not nearly as many and not nearly as big, but he also has, in his defense, has just really started ramping up raising money. And his feeling is he doesn't need as big a war chest. As long as he can get his message out, he just needs enough to do that.
There's much more about this, about Matt Brown, in the current issue of the PBN, in print and online, along with a companion article that shows, I think, the huge contrasts in the amounts of money the various candidates for governor have raised just in the first quarter, I think, of this year. Yeah,
and we didn't even have, I don't think we had the second quarter numbers yet. They just sort of came out and beat our deadline. But yeah, there's a big difference.
$4.3 million for the incumbent, $188,000 for the Republican Fung, and now we're down to 5 figures for Matt Brown and Patricia Morgan, and 3 figures for Gio Feroci. Very, very interesting, and it's all in this edition of the Providence Business News. And Mark Murphy, we thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Frank.